It
It's
is
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Good, great, awesome. That just never gets old. Um, we have such an amazing guest. Gosh, this one's hard for me because I'm pretty private about a lot of things in my life, but I felt that this was a very important conversation. So we're talking about egg freezing, but we're also talking about reproductive health in a holistic way. We talked to Dr. Ryan Funk, who, just to clarify, is a doctor of Chinese medicine, not a doctor of Western medicine, just to make that clarification. And his work through Acubalance, which is a clinic here in Vancouver, BC, that specializes in reproductive medicine. So we talk about low-level light therapy, we talk about acupuncture, we talk about the history of Chinese medicine pertaining to
Diet.
fertility, diet, supplements. We talk about what the process was, and I'm going to say this again. I'm happy to share any and all information that I have. There are specialists around the world that can also help you wherever you are listening from. And it's really closely tied into two of our episodes that we had recently. Episode 29 was on fertility as well, and episode 26 was Jilly talking about holistic health. And we do also have another episode about hormones. But Raquel, you haven't had your eggs frozen, as far as I'm aware. What were some of the things you took out of it?
I mean, it sounds like an intense process. I think it's amazing to have the support system and to look at things holistically. And I think not even just for egg freezing, but when I look at, or when we talked about diet and trying to bring the healthiest eggs, not just the most abundant amount of eggs,
Yeah,
I think that's a really important thing for everybody to look at when they're wanting to get pregnant at any stage, whether they want
yeah.
to freeze eggs, whether they just are trying to get pregnant. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I took from that is just really planning that out and looking at your health as you move forward into that part of your journey.
Yeah. So without further ado, subscribe to us on YouTube, click that little like and follow on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoy this, rate it, and keep the love coming. It's great. We love you. Here is Dr. Ryan Funk. Enjoy.
You're listening to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Kristina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Good morning, team. Welcome to Tuesday, and welcome to Raquel in being stuck in South Africa right now. So there's a little bit of a different background for those of you who are on our YouTube channel. If you're not, please go and have a look. My hair is doing wonderful things today, as opposed to a few sessions ago where I looked like Edward Scissorhands. I am going to introduce you. I'm so excited. We've been waiting for, I think it's been about 3 months trying to figure out how to coordinate a schedule to get Ryan Funk from Acubalance to come in and speak with us. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, but this one's a really special one for me because this is the first time I'm saying this in public. I had my eggs frozen. What was it? I think it was about 2 years ago now. And I'm finally ready to have a conversation about that journey, along with so many other things that we're going to talk about today in the field of reproductive medicine. So about Dr. Funk, Dr. Ryan Funk is, just to be clear, not a Western doctor, graduated as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine from the International College of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Vancouver. He then pursued postgraduate studies, completing 500 hours in gynecology and internal medicine at the Anhui. Am I saying that right? Anhui?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yay. The Anhui Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Hefei City in China. For those of you who haven't heard of Acubalance, the website will be in the show notes, but it's acubalance.ca. And I can't tell you, it single-handedly, I think, made my egg freezing a very sensitive experience so much better, and I don't like to use the word better unless I have to, but it really did. It made it completed it. We did a lot of prep in the run up to freezing the eggs, my little eggs. And so I want to talk to Ryan today about the process so that we can really shed some light on something that a lot of us don't talk about enough. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad the times finally worked out for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to speak with you guys both, Raquel and Kristina.
Thank you. So, okay, so let's get straight into this because Raquel has a zillion questions. What is Eastern and holistic medicine, and how does it differ from Western medicine?
Sure. Well,
that's the first basic question.
I know most people that are going through an egg freezing cycle, their reproductive endocrinologists and whatnot will really kind of lean in on the 2 weeks that they're doing medications for the to stimulate egg production and to retrieve as many eggs as possible. And so a lot of times they're working on egg quantity as best they can. And where Western medicine, or sorry, Chinese medicine, we really start to focus on quality. And so what can we do to help create the best quality eggs possible? And then we leave the quantity up to the reproductive endocrinologist.
And can I just jump in there just from a larger perspective, like a kind of wider perspective, Eastern versus Western medicine, for those of our audience who don't know very much about Eastern medicine, tell us a little bit about why you got into Eastern medicine, how it's different.
Sure. When I was in my teens, I was playing competitive hockey, and I found that I was reading a whole bunch of holistic books that talked about nutrition and vitamins and minerals, sleep patterns, all these things I could be doing at home. And I was learning that if I went to bed at regular hours, depending if I had a nap that day, what I was eating, certain supplements and vitamins, I was able to bring my hockey level up to a greater standard. And I had some questions, and I went to talk. I had a meeting with my Western doctor, and I went and talked to him, and I was asking him all these questions about diet and food and whatnot. And I was about 15 years old, and I knew more than he did about nutrition. And I thought, this is bizarre because I noticed such a big difference in my life when I followed these principles. And so it just showed me that, Western medicine I love. I think it's very needed and it's there, but there's this whole other area over here that can really affect our lives that's at that time in my life was neglected. Nobody had talked to me about it, and so
Right.
it was this whole new world that opened up for me.
And even now, I mean, I have psoriasis and I go to my dermatologist, and I love my dermatologist. She's amazing, but she's one of the most open to having that holistic conversation. But she'll always still turn around and go, there are not enough studies. There are not enough studies for us to prove this, right? Raquel, you've heard that so much, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing. And I think, when I want to ask, actually, I just want to when you went to China then to study, so what was that like how was the culture different? Because I'm coming from Hong Kong, I'm like, we have all these tonics and these things, and so much is about being too hot and damp, and they check the tongue, and so tell us a little bit more about that, because I know that a lot of people get really intimidated by the concept of something that hasn't been quote unquote proven by a Western series of studies. But acupuncture and diet and holistic that holistic mentality is so important. We just haven't adopted it in the same way and normalized it here. So tell me
No.
about China. Tell me how your eyes opened when you got to China.
Sure. It was really cool I worked in a hospital in China, and when you walked in the hospital, if you went right, it would be more kind of Western medicine. You had pharmaceuticals, X-rays, that kind of stuff. And then if you went left in the hospital, that would be more acupuncture, Chinese herbs, something called moxibustion that we use. And yeah, and then we do different types of testing. So in ancient Chinese medicine, we didn't have bacteria tests and fungal tests and blood tests and whatnot. So we always look at what comes out of the body. And so we do look at the tongue, and is the tongue red? Is it swollen? Is it puffy? We'll take the pulse, and it's not just how fast the pulse is, it's what is the quality of the pulse. And so is it kind of, we say, weird things like, is it a thin pulse, a wiry pulse, a floating pulse, a deep pulse? And that kind of tells us what's going on the inside of the body. So that's kind of our lab test, is the tongue and the pulse.
Mm.
And it was really neat because it was a much more integrated approach, accepted approach in China to work with both Chinese medicine at the same time as Western medicine, and to see both those systems work together to get better results with our patients.
Right. And that's what I think, I have to say, that's something that Acubalance really gave to me when I was going through that egg freezing journey. And we'll get to that point. We'll get to the process point. But yeah, thank you. It's a great way of describing, the perfect situation is the marriage of how old is Chinese? Like when you started learning about it, like, do you know how old is this medicine? Like how long have we been doing this for in China? I have no context of the history, really.
It's been, last time I heard, it's something like 5,000 years. It's been around for a really long
Right.
time. And what's really cool, because 5,000 years ago, there wasn't really any other options. So Chinese medicine, there's texts on basically treating every disorder with Chinese medicine. So there's always a chance that we can treat, from psoriasis to toe fungus to reproductive disorders to migraines, Alzheimer's. There's a chapter in our medical text to treat all these different things.
Wow.
Some we have more success with than others, but that at one point, this is the only way we could treat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how did you get into gynecology with Chinese medicine?
Um, yeah, no, I was, when I was around 14, 15, I was reading all those nutrition books. My favorite book was put out by an author named Michael Colgan. And he had this really nice thick book called Optimal Sports Nutrition. And I just digested that 10 times over, made notes. It was all falling apart. And I went and I looked at what other books he was reading, or he had written. And there's one called Hormonal Healing. And there was one, I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. And there's about 10%, 20% of the book was about male hormones. The other 70, 80, 90% was about female hormones. But I loved them so much. I read it and I digested it. And then during that time, my mom, she was going through menopause. I said, hey, mom, like, you should start taking this nutrient or this vitamin, and you should try this and that. And so she went to her medical doctor and says, well, instead of doing this, I'd like to start taking this herb or that herb. And she had a really good plan for him. And her doctor's like, this is great. Are you seeing a naturopath, or who are you seeing for this? And she's like, well, I'm seeing my son. And she goes, well, how old is he? And she goes, well, he's 16. And for me, the interest came out of that natural, just wanting to be healthier. And it just kind of, through that one author, I just started to look into how effective a diet, lifestyle, supplements can be for reproductive health.
I love that. I love how you like kind of like it starts with the sports. So we have so many conversations with people that are like athlete based, or Raquel's, got a background in dance and is a yoga instructor. And I am not either of those things. But yeah, it's really great to see how your career arrived at you.
Yeah, no, it
Just
did. It did. It really, I kind of fell into it, and I just loved it. It's so neat to see how much you can do at home naturally to have
mm.
such a big effect on your short-term and long-term health.
And I just want to say as well before we keep going, because there's so much to say. With Acubalance, what are the things that they do treat? Because there are a lot of things, and we talked about this before, but there are a lot of things there's a lot of shame around reproductive health, and we don't
Yeah.
talk about it enough. And so I want our audiences to kind of be able to be open to understanding that all of these elements are there are people that will happily create a safe space for you to explore your best practices in.
No, absolutely. Well, so we know that at least 1 in 6 couples are having trouble trying to conceive.
Mm.
And we know it seems like ever since COVID has happened, egg freezing rates have gone up a lot. We see a lot more women right now that are trying to freeze their eggs. And so it's really mainstream. There's a lot of people that are going through this, but nobody talks about it. Like you said, I think you said this is the first time you've talked about it in about 2 years.
Actually in public, but I will. That's a really great point. I'm going to say this right now. If anyone wants my notes. I think Ryan knows I made notes throughout of my personal journey of what I went through. I am so happy to share those notes because I spent 6 months going back and forth and talking to different people, and then I found Acubalance as well, which is like right at the top there. I'm like, before you do anything else, go to Acubalance. And I'm, this is not a sponsored message. This these people help me with my eggs genuinely. So if anyone does want it, I will say that I'm very, very passionate. I've shared it with like over 10 people now, and I've got a little PDF. It's like a 3-page PDF of like, this is what I went through. Now go and find your own information, and then make a valued decision based on a lot more information than some people go into. That So yeah.
And everybody's fertility journey is going to be a little bit different too. So it's like we always say that it's not only when we're interviewing patients, it's really not just, I think we offer 15-minute discovery calls where people can call in, ask some questions like, what are we about and what do we do? Because we may not be a good fit for everybody. And it's not just that we're looking for a good fit for us, but we're also looking for a good fit for you. So it has to fit together because we ask, there's a lot of homework involved when people come to see us. It's not just here, take this vitamin and I'll see you in 2 weeks. It's, I need you to change your diet or lifestyle or this exercise routine, because it's a lot of it is what you can do at home. And that's also what I find can be really empowering for a lot of patients when they're not told they can't do anything. But no, that's not necessarily true. In a lot of cases, there's a lot that we can do to really make a big shift to increase your chances of getting possibly maybe not more eggs, but better quality eggs.
Yeah.
And really, that's what we're looking for with an egg freezing is the potential of having a really healthy child. No matter how many eggs you have, if they're not good quality, it doesn't really matter. It's the quality that matters.
And just to be clear with everybody, at this stage, I'm pretty sure they still can't check the quality until you go to try and use your eggs, right?
That's correct. Um, so we know that even the best looking egg may not be chromosomally normal. So we know
Right.
that there's 46 chromosomes and there's going to be 23 in the egg and 23 in the sperm. And a lot of these eggs, they're going to actually have, instead of 23 eggs, they'll have 24 or 21. They'll be missing one or adding one. And that's where we get Down syndrome, trisomy, those types of things. But these eggs, even though they're chromosomally abnormal, may look perfect. And I believe there's a Canadian company that's an artificial intelligence company, and they're able to take a picture of the egg and they can tell you, I think it's about a 90% accuracy if it's going to be fertilized or not. But it only gives you
What?
but it only gives you fertilization rates, not
Not
necessarily if
quality.
it's going to create a healthy embryo.
Do you know what the name of that company is?
I don't know. It was just on a podcast that I listened to a few weeks ago,
Oh,
so it was
cool.
new to me, and that was my understanding of it.
That's cool. We'll have to
Yeah.
figure it out, find it.
So let's go back and just talk about everything that you guys do as well, because you were talking earlier about you help with menopause, you help with painful periods, you help with um, what
Erectile
else?
dysfunction.
Yeah.
Cell dysfunction. What else are you guys working with?
Also, anything that has to do with reproductive health, I'd say about 90% of our practice is going to be reproductive health, and the other 10, maybe 15%, will just be other people that have heard good things about the clinic and they want to come see. And we can't treat any type of reproductive health without making sure that the body's healthy, because to have a fertile body, you need to have a healthy body. So good digestion, good quality sleep, any autoimmune disorders need to be decreased. So we treat endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I treat a lot of patients that are going through menopause, erectile dysfunction. I'm treating men that have varicocele, which is a distended vein in the testicles, which can create a lot of pain and discomfort. So primarily we can treat anything to do with reproduction with both men and females and women.
Wow. Okay, so I really want to dig into Christina's journey, and then I think what we can do is just take that and expand from it, because I think there's going to be a lot of questions that come up. So, Christina, we know you went through freezing your eggs. You worked with Acubalance. Can you talk about some of the things that you did with them. So I know you worked on diet. I think you did acupuncture. What else did you
Mhm.
do? And how long? How long did this process take?
So I'm gonna ask Ryan to jump in as well, just to validate my facts, because it's been a couple of years. But first thing we did was Ryan and I had the discovery call, right? So I was pretty nervous, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know that I've chosen my clinic, and a friend of mine had thankfully directed me to Acubalance and said, look, you really want this this complementary therapy. And I'm not a stranger to acupuncture or holistic medicine at all, as we all know by now. So we had that conversation. And then I actually said to Ryan, I want to kind of get this done by the time I hit 35. Now you all know pretty much how old I am. I don't talk about that normally, but it's very important. It's very important for you to know that, because Ryan then went through some of the statistics, which I'm going to ask him to do now, and some of the information that they do know about aging and the quality of your eggs and the number of your eggs. So, Ryan, do you want to talk about what that introductory kind of conversation looked like when I
Sure.
said, I want to get this done by the time I'm kind of 35?
Yeah, and I think we'll start with the age of 35. And statistically, we know that fertility peaks in your 20s, and it slowly decreases until we're about 35, and then that speed starts to decrease. And then by the time we hit our 40s, it starts to drop really, really quickly. But those are just the statistics. We know that it doesn't mean you're not going to get pregnant. So a lot of, like, my average patient is probably about 38 to 42 years old. So when you came in, you're young. Like, I was like, oh, she's so young.
You're
Yeah, that's just,
proactive.
yeah. No, it's great. But definitely age does play a big factor. And we look at two different things. We look at chronological age. So that's, on a calendar, how old we are. But I also like to look at biological age. So biologically, how old are we? If we're showing, we have some hormone tests for fertility. One is called AMH, and that kind of looks at how many eggs we have left in the ovaries to some degree. And then there's something called FSH, but we also look at, say, vitamin D levels. We also look at iron levels. We look at inflammatory markers. And if all those are really off, you could be biologically older than your chronological age. But
Right.
we also know that there's, sometimes we see a 35-year-old, but she looks 32. Like, she
Well,
was
thanks.
yeah. And so we know that there's, so we have the chronological age. We also have a biological age.
Right. And
Yeah.
and when you say that, like, that's part of then what we did next, right? Was we figured out how long do we need to kind of get my body into a really good state. You checked my tongue. We did some. We had, like, it was probably about an hour and a half of questions of, like, my lifestyle, diet, all of that stuff. Was
Yeah,
that
that's right.
next? Yeah.
We try to do a really detailed intake to kind of see where you're at, that, not only chronological, but the biological. We look at all those things. And I think we also have to take a step back and say, okay, how does your egg develop? And how long do we have to influence that egg? So
Mm.
we know that at birth, you have all the eggs that you're ever going to have. We don't create new eggs. And then they sit dormant inside the ovary until they get recruited. When they get recruited, it takes about 100 days for them to mature and develop enough for them to be ovulated, or in an egg freezing cycle, for them to be retrieved, or for IVF, for them to be retrieved. And so we have about a 100-day window that we can create the best, most ideal environment possible to allow your eggs to reach their genetic potential. All
And
right.
I think I was like, I want to do this in 2 months.
Yeah. So we got about 60-70% of that. And you had
Yeah.
also made some changes. Like, it's not like you had done nothing and then showed up
Yeah.
at our door. You were already being proactive,
Hmm.
and which helps out a lot. So, like, somebody who's sleeping well, living well, getting acupuncture, taking vitamins, exercising, versus somebody who's, smoking and drinking every night. Even if they're identical twins with the same genetics, their egg quality is going to be a big difference.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so those are kind of like big, gross exaggerations of differences, but really the environment plays such a big role.
Yeah.
Um, generally speaking, we say that AMH levels, which looks at how many eggs we have left, it doesn't really change. It should be a statistical drop. But we often see is if we can change the environment, we see ferritin levels get back to normal. We see vitamin D levels get back to normal. We see um, FSH, all these things kind of fall into better results. We'll actually see your numbers improve as well, which is fantastic to see on a fertility side.
Mm. Yeah. So great. So then we added the extra. So let's talk about what the plan was. So we did I remember buying the Ketotarian
Yeah.
book.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I've got it still.
yeah.
And I begrudgingly fought with you over my amount of meat that I was allowed to eat, and allowed. I
Yeah.
say allowed. They're guided. He's very obviously, Ryan is much kinder than I'm portraying.
Yeah.
You cannot eat more than this meat.
No.
But those are really good, very helpful tips. Just even to the extent of saying don't have as much salad, have more cooked vegetables.
Yeah.
For me, that was very important for me to understand and start learning how to listen to my body as well.
For sure.
But then we talked about the acupuncture. So we were like, okay, well, we'll do this in the 2-month kind of window, because it's also based on when those cycles come around, right? So for everyone who's not done this before, you need to be timing it, right? So can you just speak to how the timing might work? And then we'll go into the acupuncture and the laser.
Well, so you mean the timing of,
Like when I wanted to get them frozen, because I was like, I want to get them frozen at this point, and I want this cycle, and it was when in the cycle does all this stuff happen? When does it like?
Sure. It's so because it's a 3-month, or it's 100 days, it doesn't really matter when you start, whether you're getting your period, if you're ovulating, or just your premenstrual. Those follicles, eggs, are developing already for 3 or 4 cycles down the road. So it doesn't matter as much exactly the day that you start, as long as we're getting in a good 3 or 4 months. And for you, we got those 2 months in, so we got a good chunk of it. So we still got a lot of that development period.
Yeah.
And then
I
you
was
kind of,
still healthy, and I was doing the grind at the time, and like my cardiovascular health was pretty good.
It's awesome. Yeah, really good. And we always look at, I call them for a chair or a stool to be really balanced, you need 3 legs. And so there's 3 things that we always want to be doing at home. And if you're missing one of these, you're not going to have a balanced, healthy life. And so if you're not eating well, then you're not going to do well, even if everything else in your life are really good. The other one is if you're not sleeping well. So if you're eating fantastic, you're eating perfect, organic, fair trade, all that kind of stuff, but you're only getting 4 hours a night in sleep, you're never going to have optimal health. And the last one's movement. So even if you're eating perfectly and you're sleeping 8 hours at the right times, but you're sitting in front of your computer all day long, you're never going to thrive. And so with my patients, I always look into those 3 and say, are you eating well most of the time? Are you sleeping generally well? And are you moving every day? And then I can work with that. But if people can't at least address some of those things, then it's going to be really hard for me to achieve, even with all the acupuncture and all the supplements and all the laser. If they're not able to do the homework, then it's going to be hard for us to achieve the success that our patients want and us want.
So great. Let's talk about those 3 then. The next things, the acupuncture, the laser, and the supplements. Can you talk to? I mean,
Sure.
you can talk to what I went through, or what I chose to do. I chose all. I mean, it wasn't really a choice. Like I did all 3 of the things that I needed to do.
Yeah. So we know, once again, going back into kind of like how the biology of it is, as we age, we know that a blood flow starts to decrease. We get less blood flow to the uterus. And so anything that helps to increase blood flow is going to support both egg development and uterus for receptivity, implantation, healthy pregnancies. And so acupuncture, one of the things it does, it also helps to increase blood flow to the uterus. Basically, science has shown that acupuncture does 4 things. One of those things is it improves blood flow. Another one is that it helps to regulate hormones. So there's something called the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. So it's the way that the brain talks to the ovaries. It's a feedback loop. And so acupuncture has been shown to help regulate hormones. Acupuncture also decreases inflammation. And then also acupuncture helps to reduce stress hormones. So all four of those things are just fantastic for fertility. So that's why it's been shown to be so effective with supporting IVF and regulating fertility those ways.
And
Um,
light therapy is much newer, isn't it? It's much newer science.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a lot newer. Low-level light therapy, also sometimes called photobiomodulation. Basically, we just call it laser.
Say that 10 times.
Yeah.
Photobiomodulation.
But that also works in a different way, and it supports what we do with acupuncture a lot. So it's the new kid on the block versus something that's 5,000 years old. But even laser's been used for a long time, a lot in Europe and whatnot in Asia. But laser does a few different things. It also increases blood flow, but differently than what acupuncture does. Laser does something called angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels. So it creates new superhighways for the blood to flow, say, once again, to the ovaries, to the uterus. So acupuncture helps to get more initial blood flow. Laser also helps with that, but it also helps to create, if there's some damaged cells, damaged blood vessels, it'll just bypass and help to create new blood vessels. Laser is also a strong anti-inflammatory. Which is great, especially in conditions like endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Laser is fantastic. And then it does something to support mitochondria, and it's something we haven't really talked about. So laser basically helps to stimulate the mitochondria to create more energy within the cell so the cell can function at a younger, more effective level. And so I'll do a quick little background on mitochondria. It's basically the battery pack for every cell. And as we get older, that battery slowly declines. And so anything that helps to support mitochondria is going to support overall cellular health. And the reason that's so important for fertility is that if you look at a muscle that's moving all the time, like the heart, and we look at how big the batteries are for how much mitochondria the cells of the heart have, there's more mitochondria needs in the ovary than there is in the heart.
Wow.
Which is crazy. You think the heart's beating all the time. It doesn't stop. The ovaries are just kind of hanging out. They're not doing anything. But the creation of eggs are so power hungry. So it needs a lot of energy. So anything that supports mitochondria is going to support good quality egg cell division and quality eggs. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And because I remember when you first told me that, and I was like, I've been trying to explain this to other people where I'm like, you need to send energy to your eggs. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I can't.
Think of science, like grade 10 science again. Do you
Yeah.
remember mitochondria?
Yeah.
I want to ask, so what does that feel like? So for people who are thinking about doing this, and they're thinking about acupuncture, maybe they've done acupuncture before, maybe they haven't. Does it hurt? What does it feel
Sure.
like? Does the laser hurt? Where is it? How long does it last? What does that feel and look like for people going through the treatment?
Yeah, the acupuncture needles are super small. They're very tiny. For those that have had blood taken before or given blood, our needles can actually fit down the end of some of those syringes. They're quite small. Most people feel a bit of a pinch, a bit of an ache, a bit of pressure, but it shouldn't be painful. And so, occasionally they can be painful if we come close to a nerve or something, but it's a very small percentage of the time that happens. In most cases, a lot of our patients fall asleep during treatment.
Yes.
And so it's really relaxing because remember, it is stimulating. It's hard to feel initially more blood flow. It's not like, oh, I can feel a little blood flow in my uterus after one session. You don't feel that. You don't feel, oh, I'm less inflamed. Like you don't feel that.
When does someone say, oh, my uterus is feeling really good today? How
Yeah,
are you feeling?
yeah.
My uterus is great.
But you will feel the nervous system coming down. And so that's where a lot of people do fall asleep, is because we're always coming in. It's a go, 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 go kind of time. you get the acupuncture, it brings you down. So a lot of people just come out feeling really relaxed. So that's one symptom that a lot of people will notice at each treatment, is that they just feel more grounded, more relaxed. If people are living on adrenaline, they come out really tired. They're just like, oh, once you take away the adrenaline, yeah, you're really tired.
Yeah, that
Um,
was me.
the
Well,
laser's a lot different.
well,
Where
but I wanted to just interject for a second there, because acupuncture for me, there are moments I do want to highlight that I know a lot of people who are um, very afraid of the needle aspect of it. Um, One of the things that you can feel though is, like, I remember when you'd put some of those needles in, and I would feel that blood flowing a lot
Mhm.
more. And sometimes it's not a pinch, but it's like, it's almost like when someone, like, when someone knocks your knee and there's a little bit of a reaction, that's normal too. So
Yeah.
you can have certain moments where, like, for me, I would have certain days, if I don't know what would contribute to it. You would probably know much more, Ryan. But sometimes I would respond a little bit more, like a little bit of a jerk,
Mhm.
and I'd have a little thing, and you can push. I don't think the needle. I don't think it's about the depth of the needle, but I've been with acupuncturists before where they've done really strong acupuncture, and I've
Mhm.
left feeling like I've left within hours developing bags under my eyes, toxins being released into my body. It's been like not a good experience. This is not that.
No, no, we try
This
not
is
to.
very mild.
Yeah, we try not to do it as a really strong. We find that we don't have to get that really strong reaction to have an effect.
Yeah.
When we're treating like knee pain, or somebody pulls a muscle, we use a lot of trigger points or motor points on a muscle, and that's where you're going to get a strong kind of zap, or where the whole muscle kind of quickly contracts and then relaxes.
Mm.
And if you are treating pain, you may want some of those stronger reactions. But once again, when we're trying to treat inflammation, nervous system, hormones, inflammation, we don't need to get that really strong reaction. And
Mm.
that's where a lot of people will say, oh, I don't like acupuncture. I'm like, say, just come in, let's try 1 or 2 sessions. And they'll say, this is different.
Yeah, and it really, I would say that because I've had tens of different practitioners over a
Hmm.
lifetime in different countries, and it really is like anything, finding the right people for you and finding the right people for that context. So sorry,
Yeah,
let's talk about the laser, but I just wanted to put that in there just in
sure.
case,
Yeah,
because you can respond in different ways, but yeah, you
yeah.
can feel that sometimes.
The laser, we have a couple different kinds of lasers at Acubalance, but they all work on the same way. So they have certain wavelengths, certain duty cycles, certain colors of light. So we usually use a red light, and we also use an infrared light, and they go at different depths. So we very specific on the type of laser that we're using. We use them sometimes over the abdomen, the lower back, and certain areas of the body. But generally speaking, you're not going to feel the laser. We use a cold laser. And so, you'll put it on, and it's just like, well, is it on? Is it, you'll look at it, you can see the red lights, but you don't really feel anything.
Yeah, like
And
nothing. Like it
yeah,
just
yeah,
feels like when you put a blood pressure thing on your arm, but don't do anything else and
yeah,
don't even turn on the blood pressure thing. Like it just feels like something is there,
yeah.
nothing else.
And so I know when I first started using laser, I'm like, I've had a couple of issues I've tried with the laser. When we first got them, like, is this thing on? Is it doing anything? And we know that if the light doesn't penetrate the skin, if it doesn't go into the skin, it gets reflected, it creates more heat. So the darker the pigment of your skin, we actually started getting people that saying, this is getting really hot.
Mm.
And then we've asked, and then also too, if people with tattoos, we can't put them over the tattoos because the tattoos can blister. And so it's really interesting when you think that you can't feel anything, and then all of a sudden you see these strong reactions. It really shows you how strong these lasers are. But as long as it's absorbing, you don't feel it, you don't notice it. And so that's kind of really shown to me how strong these are, is just when I can actually see some of those effects on the skin, and then also seeing at the results that you can get with these as well. So once again, the laser, because it's very anti-inflammatory, it's promoting blood flow, it's good for cells, it's really good for damaged cells. So back pain, knee pain, arthritis, those types of things. We've had patients come in, and we've had a really, really good success with treating certain types of painful conditions like that using the laser.
random question. Like I have melasma on my face,
Hmm.
and like my face skin is not great the last couple of months. I'm like, oh, I just don't. And I've got a new. I'm going to a skin specialist.
Hmm.
But can you use laser on? Like, is there face laser? Like, is there laser?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
some there?
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
need to go get my face lasered.
Yeah. We just have to make sure your eyes are covered, and then we can, yeah, we can do definitely year over your face.
Does it help with the cell does it help, like, does that help with rosacea? Like, because you know how normally you get that I've got that pregnancy mask. I've got that,
Yep.
the melasma that comes, which we should probably mention actually, because I keep bringing it up. But the melasma comes because the hormones, the hormone treatments and the needles and all of that, like
Yeah.
that creates
And we
that.
look at that, that's also going to be a form of inflammation.
Right.
And so anything that has an inflammatory part to it, the laser is usually a really good option for you.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we'll
Yeah.
talk later. Okay, cool.
Yep.
uh, um, so okay, so we did that. We talked about the laser. We talked about the supplements.
Ah, yeah. So obviously, we talked about mitochondria and how important they are. So a lot of patients will hear about antioxidants. So there's a ton of different antioxidants that we can hear about, and they all support mitochondria. So that's
Okay.
why antioxidants are so important. And then one of the most commonly prescribed is coenzyme Q10. Another form of it, or two other forms, is ubiquinol or ubiquinone. And so those are all, they've got lots of research supporting how it helps with fertility, and it's because it helps to protect the egg, support the mitochondria. So those are really, really important. So other types of antioxidants could be like vitamin C, vitamin E. Vitamin D is also really important. And vitamin D, it's something like 60 to 80% of Canadians are going to be vitamin D deficient. And we know that low vitamin D levels is associated with irregular cycles. Low AMH as well can be associated with vitamin D.
Hmm.
And so vitamin D is one of my staples that I really like, along with that coenzyme Q10.
There's always the conversation of how much vitamin D, though, right? Like, and can you bust that myth for us about like how much can you take, how much gets absorbed? Do you need to have it by light as well? Blah blah blah
Yeah, it's
blah.
we don't absorb much. Once again, like unless you're walking around in a tank top all day long in the summertime, yeah,
Oh.
you still the angle of the sun in the northern hemisphere is it's we don't absorb much vitamin D, so it's hard to get it from the sun where we live.
Mm-hmm.
And then how much should you take? Well, it's a moving target because what are your levels? And so really to find out how much you should take, you should have your vitamin D levels checked. And then if it's low, then you could take up to say like 10,000 a day for say 2 or 3 months, and then recheck your vitamin D levels. And then we would bring it down to more of a maintenance dose. For me, I would say like 1,000 is on the low side for maintenance. 3,000 is probably pretty good for a maintenance dose, but it
Right.
is different for each individual.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, but
That's
and
good to
then
know.
but it's definitely it's needed. I would suggest all my patients take it, even in the summer. If you're on holidays, out all the time, hanging out at the beach, even supplementing just on the lower side, because you're likely not getting much. But if in doubt, get those vitamin D levels tested, especially for those that have irregular cycles or low AMH. That could be a really big part of what's going on.
Right. And yeah, I've got to go because I've been waking up feeling really like head spinny recently. And I'm like, oh, what am I missing? Am I missing iron? Am I missing, I don't think it's vitamin. I have no idea. I don't know if it's my blood pressure. Like there's just so many things where I'm like, why am I feeling like spacey
Yeah.
recently? And there's so many contributing factors that we just can't be on top of, and when Western doctors, for as great as they are, they're just not, you know, with the healthcare systems the way that they are currently built, you can't just go and get a whole slew of tests done to really actually figure it out. So that was my other question: is where can you go to get these kinds of tests done? Because I know Ashley Dam is a naturopath that I went to at Acubalance, and she's amazing.
Yeah.
But where can you go to get these tests? Do you need to go in Canada anyway, or in BC, I should say? Do you need to go and get a referral from your doctor, or can you pay for these tests privately somewhere?
I think it's important not only because once you know which tests you want,
Yeah.
you may need somebody to help interpret.
Mm.
And because, like you might say, oh, my vitamin D levels are normal.
Yeah.
Well, talking like Ashley, she's fantastic, Dr. Ashley Dama. She works at Acubalance. She's one of the naturopaths we have.
Hmm.
We have two naturopaths that we work with at Acubalance. But what they can do is they can say, okay, this is within range, but optimal health, it actually should be at this level. And so I
Right.
know when we look at the Western system, they say this is the range that you should be in. But really, if you want to be healthy, this is the
Mm.
range we want to be in. And
Right.
so having somebody to help interpret these tests is also going to be really important.
Right.
And so yeah, so having when you see Ashley, she'll go through. We have a lot of shared care, so she'll look at say one of my patients. She'll go through. We'll talk before she sees my patient, and then have a few ideas of where they might be deficient or excess or something like that. She'll do a bit more of a verbal intake, and then say, okay, I think these are the tests that we should do to really optimize what's going on. And that we've got fantastic digestive tests, we've got DNA types of tests, we've got hormonal tests that we can do, and she'll find out which ones are the likely culprits, do
Mm.
those specific tests, and then be really she can really hone in like a laser pointer of exactly which supplement to take instead of kind of doing more of a carpet bomb of all these supplements. Hopefully she can kind of say, okay, these are the most important.
And I have to say, I have to second that because she was the person, and shout out Ashley Dam, because I have been struggling with like, physically burning out, and my system. I know how to run. Raquel and I are both really good at just running at stuff,
Hmm.
and then we just will like, I don't know about Raquel, but I am a puddle, and then I just melt. But she was the one that figured out with me that I was potentially like my adrenal, I had adrenal exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I started taking a product called Adraset. Do you know anything about what, I don't know how to describe it, Ryan, but within 3 weeks of me taking this particular supplement, my moods were wildly different. They were so much more, I was so much more stabilized. I was so much more able to deal um, with what would normally push me into fight or flight mode, I think. And
Hmm.
I have no idea what that science is. Do you know much about Adraset?
I don't know much about Alderset. I do know about adrenal fatigue, and there's different
Right.
stages of it.
Mm,
And basically, it's the most important. It's the first one that will take all our base hormones
mm.
and go into an instant fight or flight, and then whatever is left over, that starts to go down into our sex hormones as well. And so, if you're always in a state of fight or flight, it will negatively impact your fertility because there's no
Right.
longer the building blocks to properly create other hormones.
I thought you were going to
That
say sex drive, and I was like, well, I don't think I had a problem with that. Let's be honest. That's not. I think it stayed in a different reserve. I'm just being
yeah,
totally honest right now. Just having brunch talk at this stage.
yeah,
But yeah, great. So anyway, going back into those supplements, I
yeah.
think that's a really good point. Like, the adrenal exhaustion, and for Ashley to highlight that, having done, she also did this little thing with my bloods where we saw our bloods, and I was like, okay, and she's like, here's your bloods, here's your little blood things, here's the cells. I mean, she didn't call them blood things, but I
Yeah.
did. And then she was like, look at how they're sticking together, and
The
that's not good.
pancakes.
Yeah, the pancakes, little
Yeah.
pancakes, and they're like, that pancake's like a bit munted looking, and like it's like all denty and weird. And so then a few months later, I came back, and we worked on it, and she was like, look at your bloods now. And I was like, oh, my bloods are all happy and like little bubbles. So, all these things are important. We can't
No,
see our
they are.
bloods.
Yeah.
We need other people to see our
Yeah.
bloods.
And
Uh,
how about
That's-
diet? How did you switch up your diet? So you talked earlier about cooking vegetables instead of raw. Is that like a rule? Um, so we've got the supplements, and then how is your nutrition changing?
Sure. I'm very pro vegetables. And so I want to see, basically, I'm not going to say a lot of things different than your grandma would say. It goes back, we've kind of lost that basic traditional way of eating.
mm,
And so basically, I like to see about 50% of your plate, or if you put all the food out that you're going to eat today, I want to see about 50% primarily cooked. vegetables.
Mhm.
Then the other 50%, if you want to eat meat, can fit in that other 50%. It's not going to be 50% meat, but you're also going to have fruit. You're going to have grains. You're going to have, you could have lentils. You can have all those types of things. Um, and as well as, you know, nuts and seeds and whatnot. So we just want to make sure that we're really getting in a ton of vegetables, because right now we're eating, you know, the average person can eat no vegetables. I had one patient right now. I said, "Are you following the diet plan?" She goes, "I'm trying." And okay, well, how much vegetables are you eating? She goes, "Oh, I eat them 3 times." I'm like, "Well, 3 times what?" She goes, "Oh, 3 times a week." And I'm like, "No, that's not enough."
That's not the right answer.
No, no. I was just like, but it's just, that's what some of the patients were coming in. They're so upside down with that. And so, like I said, I don't like to be extremely specific of exactly which recipes to cook and that kind of stuff, because you can eat a really healthy Thai diet, you can eat a really healthy Mediterranean diet, you can eat a really healthy Canadian diet. Um, so we just have to change those ratios, I think. And so if we can
Mm,
increase your vegetable intake to closer to 50%, if you try to do that raw, a lot of people notice that it starts to create a little, it's hard to digest raw vegetables versus a soup or a stew or a stir fry. So I'm not saying no raw, but just it should be a smaller amount. It should be primarily cooked. And then the other 50%, just trying to get in a lot of whole foods. At Acubalance, if people are looking for like a really specific diet with recipes and that kind of stuff, we have something called the Acubalance Fertility Diet. And that's a massive booklet. It's free PDF that everybody can have. And it's got a ton of recipes of what to eat, why to eat, how to eat. And, but it's just, I like to kind of, people sometimes get caught, they can't see the forest because of the trees. They get so
mm.
overwhelmed. And just to say, okay, I need to increase my vegetable intake to this, and I'm going to decrease this, you know, and I find that is easier to swallow at first. Other people like to have a very specific diet plan, and that's where the Acubalance Fertility Diet is. It really shines. It's really awesome.
That's great. And yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. When I was in university last time, I don't know, I just intuitively, I was like, my diet is off. And what I started doing is making vegan dishes. So I
Hmm.
would go to like vegan recipes, but I know my body doesn't do well without any meat. And so I would do a big vegan dish because it would be full of like awesome vegetables. They were so yummy, great recipes. And then I would add my meat to it. And it was the best my body felt ever. It was
Mm,
so perfect. Um,
yeah.
but I think you're right. Like especially Western diets, we just don't, there's a lot of like meat and potatoes.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I'm the same way. I thrive on like a massive stir fry. I won't make rice. I'll just stir fry a bunch of vegetables up, and then I'll have a chicken breast or a piece of fish, and
Hmm.
I love it.
Mm.
I've done vegetarian diets before, and I'll be dreaming of meat. I'll think about it all day. I'm just like, I do well with meat, and but once again, not too much. I just need a little bit, and I just feel
Yeah.
like my body, it just absorbs it like a sponge. I'm also a
Mm.
big fan of bone broths as well. I really like bone broths.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, Chinese soups are really good for that. I find that a lot of them are just bone broth based. Okay, so let's recap. Let's go all the way up to where we're up to in terms of the journey. So,
Sure.
I go in. I have the 15-minute consult. I'm in the meantime. I've done my research on which egg freezing clinic I want to go to. I've gone to the open houses. I've gone to the info sessions. I've emailed the doctors. I've taken that first ultrasound that you need to take. What was it? What is it called, Ryan? When the first test you go in and do is they check whether or not you're like whether everything's in the place that it's meant to be, and that's like
Um,
right.
yeah, well, there could be. There's a couple different ultrasounds that they'll do. There's one that's called the antral follicle count,
Hmm.
and that's where they look to see how many follicles. A follicle basically is like a water balloon that has an egg floating around inside of it. Eggs are so small they can't see eggs via ultrasound. So what they're counting is follicles, and most follicles will contain an egg, but not all.
Hmm.
And so when they do an antral follicle count, they'll see kind of where your ovaries are at, how many eggs are kind of in that. We talked about that recruitment period of 100 days, about 3, 4 months. So there's almost, to oversimplify, you've got about 4 sets of eggs that are coming down. So they'll look at that next set of how many eggs they can kind of see. So it gives you a ballpark figure of how many can be retrieved for an egg freezing cycle. There's
Right.
another ultrasound that's called a hysterosalpingogram or an HSG, and
Yes.
that's where they fill the uterus with a specific type of dye that they can watch to see spill out both the fallopian tubes, and they can see if your fallopian tubes are open. They can see if there's any big abnormalities within the uterus as well, like a fibroid or possibly polyps, that kind of stuff. And then there's another one called a hysteroscope, and that's where they'll actually take a camera and look through the inside of the uterus to look for any abnormalities.
And I can't remember which ones I did. I'm pretty sure I did that the first one.
Yeah,
Not sure about the second one. Um, but yeah,
yeah,
so we did those. I did whatever I did of them. Oh.
yeah,
And then came to see you, and so really my journey started with I had already gotten I knew I was going to do this. I'd spoken to my parents about it, like really was, my parents are my support system when I need to bounce off ideas. And I was like, I want to do this. And I think this is really important. So I gathered my support system is what I'm trying to say. I got my
mhm,
support system of my close people that I wanted to tell because I was not sure how I was going to respond to any of this treatment. It was very new. I told my boss at work, who was so supportive and is one of my dearest friends anyway, so it was fine. And then we started the process. So then we were like, hey, I got onto my supplements, I got onto the new diet begrudgingly. I upped my cardio. I was in full grouse grind, running up a mountain 3 times a week mode. And Ryan was like, hey, once you start the injections, you're not going to be able to exercise like that. That's not a good idea. So 2 months we went through. I had laser. How often did I do it? I think I probably did it twice a week, I think.
yeah. We do
And
a combination of yeah. So the acupuncture and the laser, they're done at the same time, and then they're often we often have patients come in twice per week.
Mhm.
For the weeks leading up to starting the retrieval, and then even during the stimulation phase.
Right. And
Yeah.
so let's get to that phase, because I think that's the thing that scares a lot of people is when you say you're going to have to stab yourself with a needle. And it was, what was it? It's like a 10-day once you do start the hormone. So you get all these very expensive hormones that they are not shy about telling you how expensive these hormones are that they're going to give you to inject in yourself at certain times every day. What was that window, Ryan?
It's different for everybody, but
Oh,
it's
right.
usually it. I'd say it's usually around 8 to 12 days. So 10 days is right in the middle. That sounds right.
Yeah.
And during that, so you basically women you'll have a period, and then you start giving yourself all these injections, and you're on a very specific timing of all of these. You probably made yourself a little list of when to do it, how to do it.
Oh, the nurse went through. You have these videos, and you like, I just would watch them because I'd be like, I can't spill a drop of this. And I also asked, like, what happens if there's a bubble in one of the syringes? Am I going to die? Which is not true. That's not gonna happen. And so, but also I was on set because I remember calling you or emailing you and being like, oh no, I've just booked a job. My agent obviously knew because my agent knows more than anyone else does in my life. But so I told my agent and I was like, okay, I booked this job, and it was a stunt based, like I was going to have, I'm not a stunt person, but it had a lot of physical activity. So it was, funnily enough, a show called Motherland. It was so perfect. My ancestors, like my guys, I'm just like, yeah, this is hilarious. But and it was just a little part in this wonderful series, and I had to then tell production and tell casting because I had to inject at a certain time. And I don't know about anyone else who's an actor, or when you're not a lead, you're not in these huge parts. Like, I'm a day player, what they call a day player, like you just go on for it's like this one was no speaking. Like, it was not a big part at all, and I was shitting myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to tell my agent, the casting director. Now everyone's going to know that I'm freezing my eggs and that I not only have to inject at a certain time, but they are going to have to stop that production for this random person, that they could choose anyone else to be in this position. So that my whole point is, and I do have to say, Motherland, the production team, the whole team, the casting director, shout out to Tiffany Mack, because they were incredible. like absolutely incredible about it. They were like, don't worry about it a thing, we have got this. The producer offered me their own private trailer so that I could take the injection when I needed to. One of the ads came out and said, just so you know, I have a family member who's gone through this. I will shut down that production as soon as it's time for you to do this. I will pull you out of there and they will deal with it. And I was like, I couldn't have felt more safe. But I'm saying this because no matter how scared you are to talk about it, when you get to that really crucial point, like that's your life and the life of like your potential babies. Like you have to say, you have to speak to people. And my point is, the other point is that I called Ryan and I was like, I'm really worried they're going to put a strap around my whole waist and they're going to pull me really hard. Am I going to kill my eggs? Like, is that going to damage it? And we talked about it, and you talked me off that ledge and you were like, no.
Yeah.
You're fine. Obviously don't do yoga, don't like twist and turn and things more than you have to, but a couple of like, 3 or 4 big pulls of with a very a well secured belt around my eggs are far enough inside me that it's not going to be a big deal. But yeah, just sharing that little bit extra stress.
It's great to hear that they were so supportive for you.
So supportive. Oh my gosh, everybody was. And that process, by the way, of freezing up to this point is very similar to IVF, right?
There's no difference at all. The only difference between an egg freezing cycle and an IVF is that when they retrieve the eggs and freeze them with IVF, they retrieve the eggs and then fertilize them to create an embryo.
Right.
And but up to that point, it's a point that's identical. There's no difference at all.
So yeah, that's what we got up to. So now I'm at this point, I'm like injecting, I have a few days to go. So I'm exhausted as well. And this can happen, just FYI, everyone responds to it. I think, Ryan, you can jump in whenever and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone responds to these hormones differently. Yeah. What are some of the things that we can expect? Because I know what I felt. I felt tired. I felt bloated, and I was kind of waddling by the end of it, but I am also like such a drama llama. If I don't, I'll like walk around and be like, and so what are some of the things that, not drama llama people,
most people
experience?
do notice some symptoms, but of course there's some people on either extreme. And I have some patients that are like, I didn't feel anything. I had some bruises from some of the injections, but that was it. And I have other patients that they have every symptom and they can't leave their house. They can't even wear, tight clothing. Most people fall in the middle. So feeling fatigued is really, really common. Feeling bloated is very, very common. A little bit of achiness in your lower abdomen around your ovaries is quite common as well. Sometimes some digestive, yeah.
Paint me that picture though, because I've been telling this to other people. The reason that you get that achiness, the grape story. Can you tell the grape story? Is it the grape story?
I know there's one. Your ovaries are about the size of a walnut, so kind of the size of your thumb. During IVF, they get to the size of an orange. And and if people get OHSS, which we may talk about,
which I did,
they can get larger than an orange. Yeah. And so when you think that your abdominal, we always see a picture of, the uterus and the ovaries just kind of hanging there. But in reality, you have ligaments and tendons and a large intestine and your spleen and your liver and your all those things are all kind of packed in there like a jigsaw puzzle. And if one of those jigsaw puzzles starts to swell up and get big, it starts to elbow everybody else out of the way. And so you have to be really cautious, because not only is the ovary now really delicate because it's so swollen, it's also moved some of those other areas around. So if you are doing, anything that's like jumping around, kickboxing,
do not jump,
or like really strong twisting motions, you can do damage to the ovary. So you have to be very, very cautious. And it also depends on where in the stimulation or like how long you've been doing the injections for. If you've been doing them for 2 days, well, your ovaries haven't really grown that much yet. If you've been doing them for 10 days, yeah, they're pretty big. They're going to be sore. So
yeah. And also there's, oh, sorry, Raquel.
No, that's okay. Is this something that is just strictly to the hormone injections, or is this something that if you go through pregnancy, you have as well? Like, is that normal? Does everybody get that? really just with the injections?
In each cycle that a woman's menstruating or ovulating, there's one dominant follicle that gets really big and ovulates, but
Yeah.
behind that one follicle there may be 10 other follicles that were also recruited, and if they're not dominant then they get discarded and thrown away, all right, and reabsorbed. With IVF, you're taking all these hormones so that not only you're not going to just get that one follicle, they're trying to bring up all 10. So
Oh,
that's why your ovaries get so big, is because all 10 of these follicles or eggs are now going to get really, really big, causing the ovary to swell. And then they go in and retrieve them all. And so they basically drain, I call the follicle like a water balloon with the egg floating around. And so they have all these water balloons on the outside of the ovary, and then they go and they retrieve them all, and that's how they get all those eggs.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to interject with, Raquel, was like when you artificially grow these, it's like Captain America. They like normally there's like one natural person that naturally looks like the Rock that comes in and is like, "Oh yeah," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, team, that's the one." Like we'll all just like disappear back into the body. And then but then with egg freezing, with the hormones that they're putting into you, it's like, no, all of you will be Captain Americas. And so then they inject in all of them, and then all these people that aren't meant to be there are now like, oh hi, and then like squished in together. And so that weighs, right, as well. Like there's a whole bunch of,
Hmm.
is it weighing like that, or I don't know how it
Yeah, yeah,
would,
it's they're heavy. They're heavy. Yeah,
right, a bunch of Captain Americas in your
I love your superhero analogy. I might have to
right.
use that. Yeah,
Yeah, you can have it. It's I just came up with it right now.
yeah.
But that's the case, right? Because when Captain America got like um or use any X-Men analogies, but like all of them now are there, which does feel unnatural. It does.
Yeah. And you're also going in throughout that process for blood work and ultrasounds, which is also, I'm assuming with you, like, trying to do a new part on, and that kind of, it's stressful trying to
Yeah.
get to the clinic to do an ultrasound blood work when you don't really have a schedule of when you're going to have your next ultrasound and blood work.
Yeah.
And so it's almost impossible to plan for.
It's true. So I think when you're doing it, really create enough space around those few weeks. I think Ryan was really good at being like, okay, remember we're going into this phase now, so it's time to like start slowing down, not take on any other things. I think I blocked off my calendar at work, so anything that popped up I could deal with, but I had way more flexibility so that when it came to the great escape, I call it. Um, I could like I have so many egg escaping puns like the whole way through. I was like, yeah, great expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, the extraction. Anyway, but when it got to that point, I was ready, and I was ready to recover. And I think that's a really important thing to plan for, which again is why I encourage people to not do this as a knee jerk reaction, but more as something where you say, okay, let's plan 4 months. I mean, for me, it was a 9-month process from when I started looking into this. So we get to that point, and then the great escape happens, and you know, went into the clinic, and they basically, what they said is they're going to take this tiny little vacuum and they're going to and take all of the yes, it's very graphic, but don't worry.
And that's what it's like, exactly like
Yeah.
that.
uh, and they take all of these, all of the eggs that have come to fruition, I guess, like the best, that all the Captain Americas possible. Every one or two like might not have developed fully, so they, at that point, how many eggs you actually are reaping from this harvest. And then what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I think what happens is sometimes ovarian hyper, what is it? Ovarian hyper,
Hyperstimulation. Yeah. OHS. Yeah. OHS. Yeah.
OHSS,
Yeah.
yeah, syndrome.
Yeah.
What can happen, I think, doesn't, what happens after that? To like fluid goes
Yeah.
back into where the eggs were, right? Or
That's right. Because you've actually poked a hole in the ovary and it's already really swollen and it's going to start to leak fluid, and it leaks it into the abdominal cavity. It's not like it can go out anywhere. So the body has to absorb the fluid faster than it's leaking out.
right.
So it's kind of like if you have a faucet with the sink or your kitchen sink, but if the sink's a little bit clogged, it slowly raises up. And if that happens, you're going to start to notice extreme bloating. You'll notice weight gain, that you're gaining a couple of pounds a day in some cases.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. And so what generally happens, as soon as the ovaries heal, they stop leaking that fluid. And then your body can now catch up with how much fluid is in the abdominal cavity. And so anything that supports the healing of the ovaries, that kind of stuff, is going to quicken that process, that you're going to start to feel better. In severe cases, people need to be drained of that fluid.
Yeah.
And
I
they'll
was
take,
very close to that.
yeah, they can take 2 liters out at a time. Sometimes, like in extreme cases, it rarely happens, but yeah, it's horrible.
Well, I called, I think, and my nurses were, the nurses from Olive were really great with me, but having that extra team, having Acubalance was actually what got me walking. Because I remember messaging Ryan, and I think you were away. I think I went to another acupuncturist at the clinic, but because there's such thorough notes, I went to someone else, and within, I think I went to you one time and then you were away. So I went to someone else the second time. And within those 2 sessions, within 2 or 3 days, I was walking and I was starting to drain that fluid naturally. But the nurses were like, we're going to monitor you. And if this continues, you need to go to the hospital, which was fine, but not my first preference. So immediately I was like, I need to figure out what, and this is why, again, the importance of having a team around this process, not to scare anyone, just to encourage you, to inspire you to be like, this is a really fun adventure, and it can be awkward. But I had my birthday around that time. Shantae, my roommate at the time, was like incredible, and we had this picnic, and she just took all the stress out of my life for those few weeks. And same with my family. But having that support system medically, holistically, friends wise, family, whoever it is that your support system is so vital.
Yeah, it takes a village, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't have a ton of time. Raquel, did you have anything else you wanted to kind of talk about before we go?
Yeah, there's one last thing I wanted to kind of touch on before we go. And that's just about anxiety. So I know that you guys work with people who are in pregnancy or who are going through pregnancy and who are facing anxiety or anything else. Can you talk a little bit about how you help people through that? Because I think there's a big misconception, or a lot of people believe that pregnancy should just be this happy, joyful thing all the time. And especially throughout COVID, we've seen that that's not the case for a lot of people. And I think people now are just talking about it more because it's been a little bit more of an open door to talk about things like anxiety. So, can you talk about how you've helped people through that?
No, for sure. We see a lot of anxiety in pregnancy. Two things that we often treat is, well, women that have been trying to conceive for years and years and years, and then they finally have it, and they want to do anything they can not to let it go. So I think it's just natural to micromanage every little twang and pang and every feeling, and your mind instantly goes, what if I lose? What if there's a miscarriage? The other side of it is we treat a lot of patients that have recurrent pregnancy loss. And so, that's their experience. Every time they get pregnant, they're going to have a miscarriage. So the anxiety levels with a lot of our patients is quite high. And so I think a lot of the things that we can do is just seeing, like, what can we do to help, to be as proactive as possible, because not being able to do anything, we feel powerless, in which case that creates more anxiety. So I think just going over some of the basics of making sure that we are doing those, the 3 legs of the stool. Are we eating as well as we can? Are we getting a little bit of movement, but not too much movement? Are we trying to regulate our sleep? Okay, that's all going to be good for pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at the reality of we can't change the embryo at this point, but we can keep the uterine environment as healthy as possible. And so that's where the little bit of movement, getting the blood flow, and then acupuncture, there's certain points that help to relax the uterus to help with implantation. So I think kind of going over of all the things that we can be proactive with, then women will start to feel that they actually are being able to do something. They have a little bit of power in those small areas.
Yeah.
We do know that the acupuncture is really good at regulating the nervous system. So we are able to kind of, if people are at a 9 out of 10 in anxiety, they can leave the clinic at a 5 out of 10 or something along those lines, just help to bring those nervous hormones down.
Mm.
And then also seeing them regularly, because a lot of patients, once they're pregnant, they don't see anybody for a few weeks or a month. And that the anxiety will start to build too. So seeing a practitioner, regularly to discuss how you're feeling. Is this normal? Not normal? Should I be concerned? To discuss and go over all those things can be also really useful.
That's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. Ryan, thank you so much for spending time with us
Oh, it's been
today.
fun. Thank you.
It's been amazing. And I think, honestly, like I said, this isn't a sponsored message. Find your team. And actually, what I loved about Acubalance is they do say that they will figure out if it's a fit. And whatever you do, this journey, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be yours. So I think a lot of our babes is out there. If you've got family members, if you've got, partners and you want to have this conversation, then I'm really hoping that you will take some of the information that's here today. If you can't afford to go and see a clinic, if you can't afford the therapy, do what you can and do what research that you can do. And feel free to DM us if you need, and if we can
have a lot
support
of
you.
free information as well on the website.
Great.
So it's a really important. There's a lot of stuff about the diet, the lifestyle, the supplements. There's blog posts. So there's a lot of stuff that you can be doing at home without ever setting foot into the clinic.
Perfect. Yeah, that's why I like yous. Good people. Good people. Okay, thank you so much again. And I'll be coming in to talk to you about my melasma soon, probably.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.